You use money almost every single day. You tap your phone, swipe a card, hand over a few bills. In just a few seconds, a complete stranger gives you food, clothes, or something you need. The exchange feels so normal that you barely think about it. But the real question is far stranger. What if money didn't exist at all? Imagine waking up tomorrow to discover that every coin, every banknote, every credit card, and every digital payment had simply disappeared. How would you convince someone to give you bread? How would you buy a new pair of shoes? How would an entire society continue to function? Most people think they already know the answer. People just used barter. 1 chicken for a basket, 1 cow for 10 sacks of grain. Simple. Except that's probably not how the first humans lived. In fact, according to many historians and anthropologists, your ancestors spent thousands of years trading without using money, and often without using barter in the way you imagine. The real story is far more surprising. To understand it, you have to forget everything you learned from modern shopping. Your ancestors didn't walk into stores. They didn't compare prices. They didn't carry wallets. Instead, they carried something much more valuable: trust. Travel back around 20,000 years. The world looks completely different. Cities don't exist. Roads don't exist. There are no banks, no markets, no governments collecting taxes. Small groups of hunter-gatherers move across forests, grasslands, and rivers, searching for food before the seasons change again. Life is unpredictable. One week, your group might successfully hunt a large deer. The next week, you might catch nothing at all. So what happens when one family has more meat than they can possibly eat before it spoils, while another family has gathered baskets full of berries and edible roots? Would they stand there negotiating? My meat is worth exactly 3 baskets of berries. Probably not, because they weren't thinking like customers. They were thinking like survivors. Sharing wasn't just kindness. It was insurance. If your group shared today's successful hunt, someone else would remember that generosity when your own luck eventually ran out. Survival depended less on calculating exact values and more on building relationships that lasted for years. This idea still exists today. Imagine buying lunch for a close friend. You don't usually stop and calculate the exact amount they owe you. You simply assume that one day they'll return the favor. Anthropologists call this reciprocity. It means helping others with the expectation that support will eventually come back, even if not immediately. Your ancestors built entire communities around this principle. Food was shared, tools were borrowed, shelter was offered, not because every exchange was perfectly balanced, but because everyone understood that life constantly changed. Today, you help someone. Tomorrow, they help you. Over time, everyone survives together. This wasn't a written agreement. There were no receipts, no contracts, no spreadsheets tracking who owed what. Instead, human memory became the first accounting system. Everyone remembered who shared during difficult winters, who refused to help, who always took but never gave back. Your reputation became more valuable than any object you owned. If people trusted you, they wanted you in the group. If they didn't, survival became much harder. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating about the human brain. We're remarkably good at remembering social relationships. Researchers such as Robin Dunbar have argued that much of our social intelligence evolved precisely because our ancestors had to keep track of complex networks of cooperation. Your brain wasn't only remembering where food could be found, it was also remembering who could be trusted. In other words, before humans created banks, they carried an invisible bank inside their minds. Every generous act became a kind of social deposit. Every selfish act became a withdrawal. But this system had limits. It worked beautifully inside small communities where everyone knew each other. What happened when strangers met? Imagine 2 tribes crossing paths hundreds of miles from home. Neither group speaks the same language. Neither knows whether the other can be trusted. Neither expects to meet again. Now something changes. Trust disappears. Without long-term relationships, invisible social credit no longer works. This is where barter becomes much more useful. Instead of relying on future favors, both sides exchange goods immediately. A stone axe for animal skins, salt for dried fish, beautiful shells for rare pigments. The trade ends the moment both people walk away. No promises, no debts, no expectations. Just an immediate exchange. Ironically, this suggests that barter wasn't humanity's first economic system. It may actually have become most important when dealing with strangers rather than friends. That's a complete reversal of what many people imagine. For centuries, people believed civilization began with barter and eventually invented money to make barter easier. But modern anthropologists have challenged that story. One of the most influential voices is David Graeber, whose research argues that early societies relied heavily on systems of credit, obligation, and trust long before coins appeared. If that's true, then money didn't replace barter, it replaced memory. And that single idea changes everything. Because once villages grew larger, remembering thousands of promises became almost impossible. The invisible bank inside the human mind was about to reach its limit. And when that happened, humanity invented one of the most powerful ideas in history.
As villages slowly became towns, something unexpected happened. People stopped knowing everyone by name. The old system of trust still existed, but it could no longer keep up with growing populations. Your brain can remember relationships with dozens of people, maybe even a few hundred. But what happens when thousands of strangers begin living together? Memory starts to fail. Imagine trying to remember every favor, every borrowed tool, every shared meal, and every promise made over the past 5 years. It would be impossible. So your ancestors invented a new kind of memory. Not inside the human brain, outside it. Long before coins existed, ancient civilizations were already keeping records of debts. In ancient Mesopotamia, some of the earliest writing wasn't used for stories or poetry, it was used for accounting. Clay tablets became the world's first ledgers. A farmer might deliver grain to a temple during harvest season. Months later, when food became scarce, that same farmer could receive supplies in return. Nothing had to be exchanged at the exact same moment. The promise itself had value. This was one of history's greatest inventions, credit. Today, the word sounds modern: credit cards, credit scores, bank loans. But the basic idea is thousands of years old. Instead of trading objects directly, people began trading trust that had been recorded. The temple, palace, or village authority became the keeper of those records. For the first time, society didn't depend entirely on memory. It depended on written information. Archaeologists have discovered thousands of clay tablets containing lists of grain, livestock, beer, wool, and silver. They reveal something surprising. Many transactions weren't immediate exchanges, they were delayed promises. Someone gave something today because everyone trusted that the record would be honored tomorrow. Sound familiar? Every time you use a digital payment today, you are doing something remarkably similar. Your bank updates a record. No physical cash may even change hands. Yet everyone accepts the transaction because they trust the system behind it. The technology changed. The principle didn't. This is why many historians argue that debt is actually older than money itself. Before coins existed, people already understood the idea of "I owe you," and that simple sentence connected entire communities. Of course, trust still had limits. Imagine traveling hundreds of kilometers away from your home village. Nobody knows your family. Nobody knows whether you always keep your promises. The clay tablets in your hometown mean nothing here. How do you trade now? This is where barter became far more practical. A traveler carrying rare seashells might exchange them for copper tools. A shepherd might trade wool for salt. A fisherman could swap dried fish for pottery. Neither side needed a long history together. They only needed to agree that both items had similar value. But even barter had serious problems. Imagine owning a goat. You need a pair of sandals. The sandal maker doesn't want a goat. He wants grain. Now you must first find someone willing to exchange grain for your goat before returning to the sandal maker. Economists call this the double coincidence of wants. Both people must want exactly what the other has at exactly the same time. That rarely happens. The larger society became, the more frustrating this problem became. People naturally started favoring goods that almost everyone wanted: salt, copper, cattle, grain, beautiful shells. These weren't officially money yet,